Today we're going to talk about causal arguments. First of all, I want you to take special note that causal is different than casual. So we're not talking about informal, relaxed, those sort of arguments. We're talking about causal, which means it has to do with cause and effect. The good news is that most of you at some point during your high school career have written some sort of a cause and effect essay. This is going to look at sort of a more complex version of that, something that's more an argument or a position. But you do already have some of those building blocks in place. Our goals for this chapter will include that you understand what the distinguishing characteristics of a causal argument are. It also means that we're going to look at a different sort of claim form that you'll use for this compared to what you had used previously for the definition argument. You're going to learn about different types of order, and then we're going to do a couple activities that help you practice it before you need to decide on a topic for your causal argument. Characteristics of a causal argument include, first of all, that they are complex. And the first thing that I mean by that is that we're not going to have any sort of topic that's only going to have one cause and one effect. We want to look at something that's more complicated than that. It's also definition based. So part of what you have to do as a part of your argument with cause and effect is you have to be able to use definition in order to define your terms, to categorize them, to classify them, to explain how they fit into the bigger picture of your topic. We also deal with probables and not absolutes. Part of what we'll talk about with this particular section are about fallacies, which are breaks in argument. And you can avoid fallacies in your arguments by creating claims and making support that is based on something that is probable. Because we know that most of the time, if your choices for answers are never or always, those are very, very, very rarely actually true statements. So we want to stay with most likely, typically, those sort of comments. You also need to know that causal arguments are often parts of other arguments. So recommendation arguments, which are where you suggest solutions, those are based on cause and effect. Arguments about the past, the present, and the future, those often also look at cause and effect as a part of their construction. The claim format for causal arguments. A, might cause or be caused by. B, for the following reasons, X, Y, Z. So that includes both your claim and your reason, and then it's up to you in the body of your essay to talk about the warrant, the background information that we need to know to understand how this particular claim is true. The three different formats that you might use for a causal argument. So you won't use all three of these in your essay, you would use one of these three. The first is that you can look at a single cause that leads to multiple effects. You'll notice that those effects don't cause each other to happen. They're actually each a separate sort of effect. So these are all the results from a single cause. The second type of argument is where we have multiple causes that lead to a single effect. So cause 1 leads to this, cause 2 leads to this. Similar to the first argument, those causes don't cause each other to happen. There's no sort of domino effect going on there. Those are all separate causes that have all resulted in the same effect. The last type of argument structure that you can use is called a causal chain, and this is the domino effect that I talked about earlier. So you'll talk about cause, and then the first effect, and then the next thing that happens, effect 2, and then the effect that happens after that that finally leads to some sort of final effect. The important thing to note about a causal chain is that if you leave off any of the effects in the middle, you have a gap or a breakdown in your argument, and people won't understand necessarily how cause 1 and effect 4 are related. So you need to make sure that you fill in the blanks for each of those particular steps and that you're very thorough with the argument that you provide in these particular cases. There are two different types of organization that you might choose to use as a part of this. The first is chronological or time order. So when you're talking about causes and effects, you would be talking about the immediate causes or consequences. So right away, what is the first thing that's going to happen? So in terms of time, that may be one of the ways you structure your argument. You can also look at it in terms of effects. What's the first thing that's going to happen if this particular thing is done? It also talks about remote cause and consequence, but that would be further on down the chain. So the immediate effects are going to be these three things, but 5 years from now, these might also be effects that we might see. The second way that you can organize your information is by emphatic order or order of importance. So when you're trying to figure out how to prioritize or rate the causes or effects that you want to talk about in your essay, you might choose to do it through order of importance. Now you determine what that order of importance is. So it could be that these are the quickest. It could be that these are what you think are the healthiest. It could be, there's all sorts of different ways for you to qualify what that order of importance is. For most of you, it'll be the one that has the biggest effect. So the most people are affected by this particular one. So when you talk about your causes and effects, instead of using terminology like immediate, and remote, you're actually going to talk about things like primary and secondary instead. So primary cause or consequence is going to be the one that is the most important. And then the secondary causes or consequences are going to be ones that happen, but they simply don't have the same impact as a primary cause or consequence. Again, in your essays, you're not going to be focusing on all parts of those. You'll need to decide and limit your scope so that you're not taking on too much for a 3 to 4 page essay.